Baba. Our viewpoint in life is often limited and colored with the life experiences we have endured. In the Southern African American culture, we share a collective purpose that is driven by the experiences of our ancestors. Growing up in South Alabama could be tricky at times, trying to figure out what store to stop at or where to stop to eat lunch on a lazy Saturday afternoon. There was always an underlying internal dialogue. I am sure that in other parts of the world, people had similar quiet kept secrets. That only by living there could you begin to articulate the angst that crept up in your soul when you felt that your presence was unwanted. Baba had an interesting perspective on life, somewhat different indeed from my experiences as a child. There was nothing particularly striking about Babas in my story, except I am not afraid to share it. My life experiences, although significant and indelible for me, may only be fleeting pastimes or thoughts for you of an uneventful nature. Hear Baba's story of the South as she experienced it. Sitting talking to my 89-year-old aunt, she reminded me of the days when even before my parents contemplated bringing me into the world, God provided for them in the most beautiful ways. She reminded us that we thought we had it bad, but those were the best days of her life. She reflected on making cone pones, pronounced corn pones, over an open fire in the fireplace of an old 3-room house. Or if your family was privileged enough, a pot-bellied stove in a cast iron fryer filled with grease, slowly dripping her spoon in the grease, pouring it over the cone pones, with it slowly drizzling down, frying it on the outside as it cooked and baked from the heat from the inside out. They mostly cooked them when company came over, she softly recalled. It reminded me of the time when my own mother would use a similar method to cook one of our family's members' their favorite dish. She would put those delicious water cornbread drops in the garden-grown turnips that my father had tilled and nurtured until full maturity for the family. Church members and neighbors to savor them as well. Eating a few for Sunday dinner and then cooking the rest and putting them up in the freezer for entertaining guests and family at a much later date. Saving up little by little like squirrels all year long for the winter. Harvesting and canning was just a way of life for us. Always looking to the future and preparing for hard times because we knew that time would inevitably come. The turnip greens, it was something about them that made them extra special. I could never figure out if it was the love, the meat grease, or the bacon grease. LOL. We could take a half a cup of water and flour or meal and make what we call hoe cakes or cornbread patties with syrup or the liquor off of any vegetable and make a meal. Back then, lard could be multi-purposed. Grease for your hair or your legs. Boy, we sure have come a long way from charging groceries at the corner store until payday. Driving along the back roads of Alabama, along County Road 11 or 8, some say Willie Nelson lives out this way. Dirt roads in the distance, 3-room houses that people still live in, seeing that the world is not much different from how it used to be. I often wonder about the past lives of those I never got a chance to meet. I stopped along one of these old country roads one day, just curious about an old cemetery that caught my eye each time I passed, calling me, wanting to teach or tell me something of its past. As I got out of my car, a calm wind caressed my back, as to say, "Welcome. It's good that you finally had time to stop by." Before I knew it, I welcomed it, whatever it was, into my spirit and soul. I was guided to the furthest grave towards the back right part of the old cemetery. One of the things that stood out to me most was most of the headstones read, "Jane Doe, the wife of John Doe." I got the sense that a woman was defined by who she was joined to, and vice versa. It may not seem like much, but to me it was meaningful. I had just had a long conversation with my mother about the fact that I wasn't sure that marriage was not all it was cracked up to be. Not a happily ever after. Her comment to me was, "You haven't had a good one?" "No," I quickly replied. At that point, I was on my 3rd marriage, and even though I was the one to say, "I no longer want this," the previous times, reflecting back, maybe they didn't want it either. I thought that maybe it was a lesson I had not yet learned, or was this even the path I should take, marriage? I wasn't sure, but I still had a longing desire to be a wife and to be loved. Loved like I had seen my grandparents for over 40 years or so. Loved like my parents for over 55 years. It saddened me. I thought that I had failed myself, my kids, my parents, my family, and most of all, God. It was a torment that nudged me almost every day. I never even thought I lived a life I wanted. I didn't feel that I was truly loved the way I wanted to be, even by myself. So I vowed that day I would pay more attention to me. I had been in personal reflection most of my life, which is why it surprised me that I was in this position to begin with. Baffled at the all-consuming thought of, does the marriage have meaning? So I went on with my day, still feeling compelled to do something different, make some change in my life. As I returned back to my car, driving along the back roads, rolling over massive potholes and patchworks of asphalt on almost every county road, one of the most obvious things and the saddest is that the more minorities living on the road, the more potholes and patchwork. Almost an indicator to say minorities live here, and it seems as though no one cares or even considers repair until whites start to migrate from the city to the country. Uncaring politicians, it seems. Those roads I remember coming up as a kid were dirt roads that the school buses would often get stuck on, or had to do a kind of dance maneuver on wheels to get us to school an hour and a half away. To a school where in the early years, during elementary years, served hot grits, fresh eggs, and your choice of sausage or bacon with whole milk or juice in cartons. Yes, a full course breakfast. The South was a different world back then. Home remedies in the South was commonplace. I am not sure if it was one of the few cultural things we brought over from Africa or our necessity for health care, emotional and physical. Auntie was the type of person who would hack up any residue of unwanted or lost past thoughts and experiences or bad spirit she felt were trying to enter her body at any given time. A tall, medium brown woman with freckles from some ancestral connection long forgotten. She towered over me. She had to be at least 6'3". She would also take a swig, as she called it, of homebrew moonshine, whiskey, or wine to clear the toxins in her throat from the night's sleep. My uncle, we fondly called Unc, was the type of man who would hack up residue of poison toxins. He called them early in the morning after a deep night's sleep and sniff astringent alcohol in his nostrils to kill any bacteria that was lingering in the air, which made them the perfect odd couple. They were able to keep their somewhat strange quirks within their close-knit circle. He was the total opposite of Auntie's height. He stood about 5'3", short for a guy in our family, but he was my uncle by marriage. It was rumored that he would often walk around naked in their yard, protected by a wooden panel privacy fence. He would always comment when the neighbors or family would question him about it. "Is this your yard? Okay then, stay on your side of the fence," which made sense to me, but not to others. That was just Unc, and I respected him for that. Home remedies were much better than the cattle herding of patients in mental health. Watching companies, no matter how good, not giving enough support to their therapists and healthcare workers who try their best to give their patients the best. Work-life balance is essential as well. America seems to be bursting at the seams on every level. We must find a way to find peace and solace, one by one, household by household, in order to find comfort. We may need to take a page from their history book. To get a quality healthcare provider, you will have to drive at least an hour and a half, not to mention the extra expense, like the cost of getting there, taking off work, missing pay, having a copay or health insurance coverage. My grandfather, who had lost one of his lungs to cancer about 6 months after his youngest child graduated high school, was living in what we now call the family house, tied to air property like most in the South. Needed an ambulance late one evening, as my mother recalled. The last words she heard as he requested to be transported to the ER in Montgomery, Alabama, being told by the ambulance driver, "You have to go to the one in Troy due to some policy." Grandpa quoted, "And they say this is a free country." He would not live to see another day in that home, and we lost one of the greatest patriarchs of our times. Those words still haunted my mother, still at the age of 76. It was sad, disheartening to think, even though we have made tremendous strides in America, rural communities still suffer in ways others could never bear. At that time, I had a faint desire to live for a better tomorrow. Other times,